My name is Harper Brennan. I'm 33 years old and I work as a paralegal at Kaufman and Dale, one of the most prestigious litigation firms in the city. I am, by temperament and training, someone who believes in order. I believe in documentation. I believe in precision. I arrange things. I organize things. I file things away in folders and systems that make sense. When I'm anxious, I adjust my sleeve cuffs. When I'm nervous, I reorganize water glasses on tables. These small acts of ordering keep me grounded in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable. My husband's name is Lucas Brennan. He's 40 years old and he works as an operations supervisor at a company called Ridgeline Freight. Ridgeline is a logistics company that handles shipping and distribution for major retailers. Lucas works in operations management, which means he manages people and resources and schedules, and all of the logistical infrastructure that keeps the company running. Lucas is ambitious. Lucas is charming. Lucas is the kind of person who walks into a room and somehow becomes the most important person in that room through a combination of confidence and presentation, and an almost supernatural ability to make other people want to make him successful. When I met Lucas, I was 26 years old, and I was deeply impressed by his ambition. I was impressed by his confidence. I was impressed by his certainty about what he wanted and where he was going. He wanted to move up in his company. He wanted to be promoted. He wanted to have significant responsibility and significant compensation and significant status. And I believed in him. I supported him. I organized my entire life around supporting his ambitions. I have now spent 7 years rearranging myself to fit around Lucas Brennan's life. I have taken overtime at my law firm to cover household expenses while Lucas navigated the politics of corporate advancement. I have adjusted my social calendar to accommodate his networking events. I have learned to be proud of my own accomplishments while still making sure that his accomplishments received more attention and celebration. I have, in essence, become a supporting character in a drama that was primarily about him. But this story doesn't begin with my realization of that fact. This story begins with a birthday party. The birthday party is being held at a restaurant called Marcello's. It's a high-end restaurant in the downtown area, the kind of place where the lighting is deliberately dim so that everyone looks flattering, and the wine list is longer than most people's personal libraries. The party is supposed to be celebrating Lucas's birthday. It's supposed to be a gathering of close friends and family to commemorate the fact that Lucas has now reached 40 years old and entered a new decade of his life. I'm looking forward to this party. I'm looking forward to having an evening where I don't think about work, where I don't think about the overtime hours I've been putting in to cover Lucas's financial contributions to our household, where I don't think about the subtle comments he's been making lately about how I'm not being supportive enough of his career trajectory. I put on a dress that I know he likes. I do my hair in the way he prefers. I prepare myself to be the kind of wife that makes him look good, which is the role I've learned to play so thoroughly over the years that I've almost forgotten it's a role. Before we leave the house as we're getting ready to go to Marcello's, I say something to Lucas. It's a small thing, but in the context of everything that's about to happen, it becomes significant. Don't bring Nora to this party, I tell him. Nora Castellano is the regional director of Ridgeline. She's 47 years old. She's powerful within the company. She's important to Lucas's career because she has significant influence over promotions and opportunities within Ridgeline's organizational structure. This should be about celebrating you and your life outside of work, not about work relationships. Lucas responds with a tone that suggests I'm being absurd. Why would you even say something like that? I'm not bringing Nora anywhere. This is a family party, obviously. But there's something in the way he says M. That's his nickname for me, derived from my maiden name. That makes me uneasy. There's something in the way he dismisses my concern that suggests he's already thinking about exactly what I just asked him not to do. There's something in the way he responds with such immediate defensiveness that tells me I've touched on something he's sensitive about. "You're being strange," he continues. "Why would you even think I would bring my boss to my birthday party? That's weird." "I'm not saying you would do it intentionally," I tell him carefully. "I'm just saying that I've noticed that you and Nora spend a lot of time together for a professional relationship, and I've noticed that you talk about her in ways that suggest she's become more than just your supervisor. So I'm just asking you not to bring that dynamic to tonight. Keep tonight separate." "You're jealous," Lucas says, and he says it with the kind of certainty that comes from having won arguments this way before. "You're jealous that my boss is a woman and that she respects me and that she takes my career seriously. And you're trying to control me by telling me who I can and can't have at my own birthday party. That's not cool, Harper." I don't respond to this. I've learned over 7 years of marriage that responding to accusations of jealousy or control just leads to longer arguments about my emotional issues and my insecurity and my failure to be supportive of his ambitions. So instead, I adjust my sleeve cuffs and I get in the car with him and I drive to Marcello's. When we arrive at the restaurant, I see that the restaurant has organized a private dining room for our party. There's a table that seats about 20 people. There are place cards indicating where people are supposed to sit. There's a seating arrangement that's been carefully thought out by either Lucas or someone he coordinated with. And I immediately understand what's happening. Nora is sitting at the table. She's seated right next to the head of the table, which is where Lucas is positioned. The place card next to Lucas reads "wife," and my place card reads "marketing associate." I'm positioned at what is essentially the opposite end of the table from Lucas, next to people who work in marketing for Ridgeline and who don't have significant seniority or importance. I understand what this seating arrangement communicates. It communicates that Nora is more important to Lucas than I am. It communicates that Nora deserves to sit next to him at his birthday celebration. It communicates that I am peripheral to the actual narrative of Lucas Brennan's life. A photographer is circulating through the party, taking photographs. The photographer captures a moment where Lucas reaches over and places his hand on Nora's back. The photographer captures the way that Nora is looking at Lucas with an expression that's professionally appropriate, but also something else. Something that has undertones of possession and protection, and possibly something more intimate. The photographer captures the way that Lucas is angled toward Nora, even though she's supposed to be celebrating his birthday. I sit at the other end of the table. I make small talk with people I barely know. I drink wine that I'm not tasting. I observe the performance happening in front of me, and I understand, in that moment, that I have been slowly erased from my own marriage. I also understand something else. I understand that I have been putting in overtime hours at my law firm, 173 hours over the past 18 months, to cover household expenses and financial obligations so that Lucas could focus on his career advancement. And I understand that part of his career advancement has involved building a relationship with his regional director that has crossed professional boundaries. During the party, I go to the restroom. I need a moment away from the noise and the performance and the reality of what's being communicated to me through seating arrangements and hand placements and the photographer's lens. In the restroom, I look at myself in the mirror. I adjust my sleeve cuffs. I reorganize the paper water glasses on the counter, and I make a decision. I pull out my phone. I open a folder on my phone called Encrypted 173. In this folder, I have been quietly and systematically documenting things for the past 18 months. I have saved photographs from company events. I have saved expense reports that don't match what I know about Lucas's actual work obligations. I have saved screenshots of text message conversations that I found on a shared cloud account. I have saved documentation of instances where Lucas has come home late, smelling like expensive alcohol and men's cologne that isn't his own, with explanations about team bonding that don't quite align with the actual dates of company events. 173 items, 173 pieces of evidence, 173 silent admissions of complicity on my part, because I have been protecting Lucas. I have been covering for him. I have been making excuses to myself about what I'm seeing, because I didn't want to believe that the life I had built with him was constructed on dishonesty. And I realize, standing in the restroom of a restaurant while my husband sits at a table next to another woman with his hand on her back, that I have been accumulating this evidence not to use it. I've been accumulating it because I've been hoping I was wrong. I've been hoping that if I just documented things carefully enough, I would eventually find an explanation that made all of this make sense in a way that didn't require me to accept the reality of what was happening. But I'm not wrong, and there is no explanation that makes sense. And I'm done. I call Rachel Mendoza. Rachel is a labor attorney who specializes in workplace law. I met Rachel at a networking event about 2 years ago, and we've maintained a professional friendship. More importantly, Rachel is smart. Rachel is strategic, and Rachel knows how to handle complicated workplace situations. I need to send something to my husband's company, I tell Rachel, and I need to do it in a way that creates a legal record and protects me from retaliation. Can you help me? Of course, Rachel says, and I can hear the shift in her voice from casual to professional. What are we dealing with? Workplace harassment, sexual harassment specifically, involving my husband and his boss, and evidence of improper conduct. Are you the one being harassed? Rachel asks. No, I tell her. But I have documentation, and I'm ready to use it. There's a pause on the line. I think Rachel is processing what I'm actually saying, that I'm about to blow up my marriage by reporting my own husband. Okay, Rachel finally says. Let's set up a call tomorrow, bring the documentation, and Harper? I want you to know that what you're about to do is going to be hard, and it's going to change things. But I also want you to know that sometimes the hardest thing is the right thing. So we'll figure this out together. I get back to the table. I smile at Lucas. I participate in the birthday cake celebration. I sing happy birthday with everyone else. And I wait for the moment before dessert arrives, because I have decided that before dessert, before any final courses are served, before the evening comes to a natural conclusion, I'm going to send an email. I'm going to send an email to the CEO of Ridgeline Freight. I'm going to send an email to the company's ethics hotline. I'm going to send an email to Patricia Chin, who is the compliance officer and executive assistant to the CEO. And I'm going to attach 173 pieces of evidence documenting a relationship between Lucas Brennan and Nora Castellano that appears to violate company policy, workplace conduct standards, and potentially local laws regarding workplace harassment. I'm going to do this before dessert arrives. I'm going to do this while I'm still sitting at a table with the man I've spent 7 years supporting. I'm going to do this while I'm still wearing the dress he likes and the hairstyle he prefers. I'm going to do this while I'm still technically married to him, and I'm going to do it because I have realized that protecting him was never actually protecting him. It was enabling him. It was allowing him to believe that there were no consequences for his actions. It was teaching him that I valued our relationship more than I valued my own self-respect, and I'm done doing that. The moment before dessert is served at Marcello's is a moment that will eventually divide my life into 2 distinct periods. Before I sent the emails, and after I sent the emails. I've come to understand that some moments function as hinges in human existence. They're the moments when you make a choice that seems small in the moment, but that reverberates outward and changes everything. This is one of those moments. But before I get to the emails, I need to explain what I've discovered about the relationship between Lucas and Nora. I need to explain what the 173 pieces of evidence actually document, because understanding what I'm about to do requires understanding what I've uncovered. The relationship between Lucas and Nora is what I would categorize as a mentor-protege relationship that has crossed professional boundaries. It's possible that the crossing is purely one-directional, that Nora has crossed boundaries in her mentoring of Lucas, or it's possible that Lucas has participated in crossing boundaries in ways that he's been hiding from me. Or it's possible that the relationship is exactly what it appears to be. Something that has intimate undertones despite the fact that both Lucas and Nora are married to other people. What I know from the documentation is this: Lucas frequently refers to Nora as his mentor. But the nature of the mentorship seems to extend beyond professional guidance. The documentation includes text message conversations between Lucas and Nora, where they discuss things like career advancement timelines and making the jump to upper management. But these discussions are interspersed with personal comments and inside jokes and references to events that don't appear on either of their official calendars. The documentation includes hotel booking receipts from occasions when Lucas claimed to be at company conferences, but the hotel bookings are for suites that seem significantly more expensive than a standard business accommodation would require. The documentation includes credit card statements showing multiple charges at high-end restaurants on dates when Lucas told me he was working late at the office. The documentation includes email chains where Nora appears to be using her position as regional director to circumvent normal approval processes for Lucas's promotions and raises. The documentation includes instances where Nora has apparently recommended Lucas for positions that he wasn't formally qualified for, and where she's used her political influence to fast-track his advancement. Most damaging of all, the documentation includes a 7-second video clip that was taken at a company event approximately 6 months ago. In this video, Nora places her hand on the back of Lucas's neck while they're having what appears to be a conversation. It's not an aggressive gesture, it's not overtly sexual, but it's intimate. It communicates ownership. It communicates familiarity that goes beyond professional appropriateness. The 7 seconds of video has become, in my mind, the central piece of evidence, because the 7 seconds communicate something that all the other documentation only suggests. This is not just a professional relationship. This is something else. Something that Nora feels comfortable enough expressing physically, in front of people, at a company event. I've also discovered something else in my documentation. I've discovered that there's a pattern of complaints in the HR system about Nora's behavior toward other employees, female employees specifically. Complaints about favoritism, complaints about inappropriate conduct, complaints about the way that Nora appears to use her position to advance the careers of people she's close to, while excluding or marginalizing people who aren't in her inner circle. All of these complaints, according to the documentation, were filed away without investigation. All of them were essentially buried. Which brings me to Patricia Chin. Patricia Chin is the compliance officer at Ridgeline. She's also the executive assistant to the CEO. Patricia is 50 years old. She's been at Ridgeline for 17 years. And approximately 1 year ago, Patricia was apparently passed over for a promotion that she was qualified for. That promotion went to Nora. According to one of the pieces of documentation I've uncovered, Patricia had previously warned the company's upper management about Nora's conduct. Patricia had apparently flagged concerns about Nora's management style and the way that she appeared to use her position to advance people she was in relationship with, while marginalizing people who weren't. Nobody believed Patricia. Nobody took her concerns seriously. And then, Nora was promoted to a position that Patricia wanted, which essentially communicated to Patricia that her concerns had not only been ignored, but had been held against her professionally. This is important context, because when I send my emails, Patricia is going to receive one of those emails. And Patricia is going to have a very specific reaction to receiving evidence that validates everything she's been saying for the past year. It's the evening of the party. Dessert hasn't been served yet. I'm sitting at a table with 20 people, including my husband and his boss. The photographer is still circulating. The lighting is still dim. The wine is still flowing. And I pull out my phone. I open my email application. I draft 3 separate emails, And I draft them very carefully, because I understand that these emails are going to become legal documents. They're going to become part of a corporate investigation. They're going to become part of my divorce proceedings. They're going to become part of a legal record that will exist for years, possibly decades. The first email goes to the General Counsel of Ridgeline Freight. The email is professional. The email is neutral. The email contains a factual summary of the documentation I'm providing and a simple statement. I believe that the information contained herein indicates potential violations of company policy regarding workplace conduct and professional relationships. I am providing this documentation in good faith and request that it be reviewed by appropriate company personnel. The second email goes to the company's ethics hotline. Ethics hotlines are designed specifically for people to report concerns that might not feel safe to report directly to management. This email contains similar language to the first email, but it emphasizes the aspects of the documentation that relate to potential conflicts of interest and abuse of position. The third email goes to Patricia Chin directly. This email is slightly different in tone. This email acknowledges that Patricia has previously expressed concerns about similar conduct. This email validates those concerns. This email provides documentation that supports what Patricia has been saying all along. This email essentially says, "You were right, and here's the evidence to prove it." I attach 173 documents to each email. 173 pieces of evidence, 173 items that collectively paint a picture of a relationship that has crossed professional boundaries, possibly violated company policy, and potentially involved abuse of position and misuse of company resources. And then I hit send. All 3 emails go out simultaneously. The moment I hit send, I feel a physical sensation in my body. Something like relief, and something like terror happening at the same time. Nobody at the table knows what I've just done. Lucas is in the middle of a conversation with Nora. My parents, who are also at the party, are enjoying their meal. The photographer is taking pictures. The evening is proceeding as planned, but everything has changed. Somewhere in the next few minutes, the General Counsel of Ridgeline Freight is going to receive an email with 173 attachments. The ethics hotline is going to receive that same email. And Patricia Chin is going to receive that email and realize that she's not crazy, that the concerns she's been raising all along are legitimate, and now she has documentation to back those concerns up. What I don't know yet is that this moment, the moment before dessert arrives, is going to trigger a cascade of events that will eventually result in investigations, firings, lawsuits, and the dissolution of my marriage. But I can feel the beginning of it. I can feel the way that the world is about to shift. Within 20 minutes of my sending those emails, Nora receives a phone call. She checks her phone, and her entire body language changes. She excuses herself from the table. She goes to the restroom, and while she's in the restroom, she sends a text message to Brett Owens, who is the CFO of Ridgeline. That text message reads, "Delete everything. All logs from tonight. All expense files from the past 18 months. Everything related to LB, do it now." What Nora doesn't know is that there's a cybersecurity specialist named Caleb Foster who works for Ridgeline. Caleb Foster has been aware, through corporate channels and through conversations with IT personnel, that there have been concerns about potential destruction of company records. And Caleb Foster, motivated by his own understanding of corporate ethics and potentially by his own experiences with workplace harassment, has quietly set up what's called a retention snapshot. A retention snapshot is a cybersecurity feature that essentially creates a frozen copy of all electronic communications and file systems at a particular moment in time. It's designed to preserve evidence and prevent destruction of records. And Caleb Foster has set up this retention snapshot specifically to catch exactly what's about to happen. So when Nora sends Brett Owens the text message to delete everything, Caleb Foster is capturing that text message. He's capturing the moment when a regional director attempts to destroy company records. He's capturing the moment when someone tries to cover up the very conduct that I've just reported. At approximately the same time that Nora is sending that text message, Patricia Chin is reading my email. Patricia is opening the attachment. Patricia is looking at the 173 pieces of evidence. Patricia is having a moment of validation that's mixed with anger and frustration and vindication. And Patricia is making a decision. Patricia picks up the phone and calls the CEO. Patricia tells the CEO that she's received a formal report through her compliance channels. Patricia tells the CEO that the report contains significant documentation of potential policy violations. Patricia tells the CEO that if this report is not properly investigated and acted upon, the company faces serious legal exposure. And more importantly, Patricia faces serious legal exposure for failure to fulfill her compliance responsibilities. The CEO listens to Patricia. The CEO reads the email with the 173 attachments, and the CEO makes a decision to initiate a formal investigation. By the time dessert is served at Marcello's, which is approximately 45 minutes after I sent the emails, Ridgeline Freight's corporate office has already suspended Nora's and Lucas's access to company systems. They've already notified the company's legal department that a formal investigation is underway. They've already begun the process of preserving evidence and interviewing personnel. But Lucas and I don't know any of this yet. We're still sitting at the table. Dessert has arrived. We're singing happy birthday. We're pretending that everything is normal. And then Lucas's phone vibrates. He looks at his phone, and I watch his face change. I watch the moment when he understands that something has gone very wrong. I watch the moment when he realizes that someone has reported him. He looks across the table at me, and I look back at him without looking away. And in that moment, without speaking a word, we both understand what has happened. We both understand that whatever was going to happen between us, whatever compromise or conversation or difficult negotiation might have been possible if I had chosen to handle this privately, all of that is now over. The evening continues, the party continues, but everything has changed. The phone call from HR comes at 7:30 in the morning, approximately 14 hours after I sent the emails. I'm already awake. I haven't actually slept. I spent the night in a state of anxiety and relief and regret and clarity that doesn't leave much room for sleep. The HR person on the phone is reading from a script. She's explaining that my husband has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into potential workplace policy violations. She's explaining that Ridgeline is taking the allegations very seriously. She's explaining that I may be contacted for additional information if needed. I tell her that I understand. I tell her that I'm available if the company needs anything from me. And I hang up the phone. Lucas is still sleeping when the call comes in. Or at least, he's in bed and appears to be sleeping. But I suspect that he's actually awake and just not ready to deal with the reality of what's happened. I go downstairs and I make coffee and I sit at the kitchen table and I wait for him to eventually come downstairs and understand what I've done. When Lucas finally comes downstairs, it's almost noon. He's been sitting in our bedroom for almost 5 hours. He's been dealing with phone calls and emails and messages from lawyers and company personnel and his family members asking what's happening. And now he has to confront me. "What did you do?" he asks, and there's no anger in his voice. There's just a kind of hollow confusion, as if he genuinely cannot comprehend how his wife could have done something like this. "What I should have done months ago," I tell him. "You reported me," he says, "to my company, without talking to me, without giving me a chance to explain or defend myself or—" "Explain what?" I interrupt. "What would you explain, Lucas? That the 7-second video of your boss with her hand on your neck was misinterpreted? That the hotel bookings and the restaurant charges were business expenses? That the text messages between you two at 2 in the morning were professional consultations?" You went through my phone, Lucas says, and now there's anger in his voice. You violated my privacy. I didn't go through your phone, I tell him. I accessed the shared cloud account that you set up because you wanted to share photos with me. I saw things that were in a folder marked personal that weren't actually personal at all. And yes, I made the decision to investigate further, and I'm not sorry about that decision. Lucas sits down at the kitchen table. He looks older than he did yesterday. He looks like someone who's aged a decade in the course of 14 hours. They're going to fire me, he says quietly. Probably. I agree. That depends on what the investigation finds and what decisions the company makes about discipline. Did you think about that? Lucas asks. Did you think about what this would do to me? Did you think about the fact that I have a career and a reputation and a future? Yes, I tell him. I thought about all of that. And I decided that your career and your reputation and your future are less important than my integrity. Less important than my willingness to accept basic workplace standards. Less important than my refusal to be complicit in your misconduct. The conversation doesn't go anywhere from there. Lucas stands up and walks out of the kitchen. He goes upstairs and I hear the bedroom door close, and I sit at the kitchen table and I try to figure out what happens next. What I don't know is that Marcus, Lucas's younger brother, has been trying to reach me. Marcus is 37 years old. He's close to Lucas. He's been supportive of Lucas's career ambitions. Marcus initially responds to the news about Lucas's suspension with disbelief and defensive reactions. He calls me and he's angry. How could you do this to my brother? Marcus demands. How could you report him to his company without even talking to him first? I showed him the evidence, I tell Marcus. I showed him what I had documented, and he didn't deny any of it. He just acted like I was the problem for noticing. That's not the point, Marcus says. The point is that you destroyed his career without giving him a chance to... And then I interrupt him. I send him the photograph, the 7-second video, the hotel receipts, the email chains where Nora is using her position to advance Lucas's career in ways that don't align with normal corporate processes. I send him everything. And Marcus stops talking. Marcus stops being angry. Marcus begins to understand that his brother has done something that he can't defend. He wasn't honest with you, I tell Marcus, and now you're being given the choice to respond to that dishonesty by either supporting him anyway or by accepting the reality of what he actually did. And I understand that you love him. I loved him too. But love doesn't mean accepting deception. Love doesn't mean pretending that someone didn't do what they clearly did. Marcus hangs up the phone. But 2 days later, Marcus calls me back and tells me that he's decided not to support Lucas. He tells me that he's seen the evidence and he can't defend his brother's conduct. He tells me that his brother has been dishonest, not just to me, but to their entire family. In the meantime, the investigation at Ridgeline is progressing very quickly. Caleb Foster has provided the retention snapshot to the investigators. Patricia Chin has been cooperating fully, providing documentation of all the complaints she's made over the years about Nora's conduct. The company's legal department has interviewed multiple employees about Nora's management style and her relationship with Lucas. And Nora has apparently hired a lawyer. Nora's lawyer has sent a letter to Ridgeline, alleging defamation and claiming that the investigation is a retaliation attack designed to damage Nora's professional reputation. The lawyer is essentially threatening to sue if Ridgeline takes any disciplinary action. But Ridgeline doesn't back down, because they have the retention snapshot, because they have Patricia's testimony, because they have 173 pieces of evidence supporting the allegations, because they understand that the legal exposure from not addressing workplace harassment is far greater than the legal exposure from defending their investigation against allegations of defamation. There's a moment, approximately 1 week after I send the emails, where I'm at my own office at Kaufman and Dale. Rachel Mendoza calls me, and she tells me that she's been talking to a divorce mediator about how to approach my separation from Lucas. We need to strategize about the financial aspects, Rachel tells me, because if Lucas loses his job, that affects spousal support calculations. And if there are findings about harassment and fraud in his corporate investigation, that could affect how we present the dissolution of your marriage. I don't want his money, I tell Rachel. That's not the point, Rachel responds. The point is that you've spent 7 years supporting him financially while he was conducting an inappropriate relationship with his boss. You've contributed to his career advancement while he was using that advancement to increase his access to his boss. You're not responsible for his choices, but you are entitled to fair settlement of your joint marital assets. That's not punishment. That's just fairness. I understand what Rachel is saying. I understand that protecting myself legally and financially is not the same as revenge. I understand that making sure I'm taken care of in this dissolution is not betrayal. It's basic self-respect. There's also a moment, very private, where I'm alone at home. I access the voicemail on my phone. I find a message from Lucas that was left on my birthday last year. He's saying something like, "I'm proud of you. I'm so proud of the woman you've become. You make me want to be better." I listen to this message. I listen to it all the way through. I sit with the fact that there was a moment when Lucas actually did want to be better, actually did respect me, actually did appreciate my presence in his life, and then I delete the message. I don't do it angrily. I do it the way you let go of something important that no longer serves you. I do it the way you release something that's been holding you back. The announcement from Ridgeline comes on a Tuesday morning. It's released through the company's standard communications channels, and it's also disseminated through news outlets because the story has become significant enough to be considered newsworthy. The announcement states that Ridgeline has conducted a comprehensive investigation into allegations of workplace misconduct, inappropriate use of company resources, and potential violation of company policy. The investigation has resulted in 2 terminations. First, Nora Castellano, Regional Director, has been terminated for harassment and retaliation, as well as for initiating an attempt to destroy company records. Second, Lucas Brennan, Operations Supervisor, has been terminated for participation in workplace harassment and for misuse of company resources and falsification of expense reports. The announcement also states that the investigation found that various company systems and processes failed to adequately address previous complaints about similar conduct. The company is implementing new training and new monitoring procedures to prevent future violations. The announcement also mentions that the investigation was initiated after a whistleblower report, and that the company is protecting the identity and employment of the person who made that report, consistent with applicable whistleblower protection laws. So now the world knows. My colleagues at Kaufman and Dale know. My parents know. Lucas's colleagues know. Everyone knows that I've reported my husband to his company. Everyone knows that Lucas has been fired for workplace misconduct. Everyone knows that the suburban professional marriage that I presented to the world was actually built on deception. The phone calls start coming within hours of the announcement. My mother calls and wants to know if I'm okay. My father calls and tells me that he's proud of me for doing the right thing, even though he knows it's going to be difficult. My brother calls and wants to make sure I have support. My colleagues at Kaufman and Dale call and want to know if there's anything they can do to help. I get calls from lawyers offering to represent me in the divorce. I get calls from financial advisors offering to help me restructure my finances now that Lucas is no longer employed. I get calls from counselors offering to help me process what's happening. What I don't get is any communication from Lucas. Lucas is apparently dealing with his own legal crisis. Nora has sued him for defamation, alleging that he was complicit in reporting her to the company, and that his complicity was motivated by a desire to protect his marriage. Lucas's lawyer is apparently advising him to not communicate with me directly. But there is one communication that happens. It happens about 2 weeks after the announcement. I go to what I think is going to be a divorce mediation session with Rachel and a mediator that Rachel has arranged. But when I arrive at the mediator's office, I find that Lucas is there, and he wants to talk to me privately before we begin the mediation. "I'm sorry," he says, and he's crying, which I've never actually seen him do before. "I'm sorry for lying to you. I'm sorry for the relationship with Nora. I'm sorry for putting you in a position where you had to decide between protecting yourself and protecting our marriage. I'm sorry for all of it." I listen to him say this. I sit with it. And I realize that his apology, while genuine and while emotional, doesn't actually change anything. It doesn't undo the 7 years of building a life around his ambitions. It doesn't undo the 173 pieces of evidence I accumulated. It doesn't undo the moment I sent the emails. It doesn't undo the fact that I've learned I'm capable of acting in my own interests, even when doing so is extremely difficult. "I know you're sorry," I tell him, "and I believe you. But being sorry doesn't mean I have to stay married to you. Being sorry doesn't mean I have to rebuild trust that you've broken. Being sorry just means that you understand what you did. It doesn't mean there's a path forward." "I still love you," Lucas says. "I know," I tell him, "and I still have feelings for you. But love isn't enough. Love doesn't create a sustainable marriage when one person has systematically lied to the other. And I've decided that I deserve to be in a relationship where I'm not going to have to spend my time documenting evidence that my partner is betraying me." We go into the mediation. We discuss asset division. We discuss the process of dissolving our marriage. We discuss the practical requirements of ending 7 years of partnership. And the mediation proceeds very efficiently because neither of us is fighting over resources. We both just want the dissolution to happen. At the end of the mediation, we sign documents that formally initiate the divorce process. And in that moment, I place my wedding ring on the table in front of me. I don't do it dramatically. I don't throw it or do anything that would be performative. I just remove the ring and place it on the table, and I watch as Lucas picks it up, and I know that he understands what that gesture means. It means that the marriage is over. It means that whatever we were to each other is no longer sustainable. It means that I have chosen myself. Meanwhile, the corporate investigation at Ridgeline continues. Caleb Foster's retention snapshot leads to additional disciplinary action against Brett Owens, the CFO, who was implicated in the attempt to destroy records. Patricia Chin is promoted to a position overseeing workplace conduct and compliance training. The company implements new policies around supervisor-subordinate relationships and documentation of managerial conduct. And most importantly, the company initiates what's called mandatory boundaries training for all supervisory and management personnel. This training is designed to help managers understand appropriate professional boundaries, to recognize when they're crossing those boundaries, and to understand the consequences of maintaining inappropriate relationships with subordinate employees. I'm asked to participate in developing this training. Patricia Chin specifically requests that I be involved because she wants the training to be informed by an actual case study of the consequences of boundary violations. She wants managers to understand not just the corporate liability, but also the personal devastation that comes from allowing professional boundaries to dissolve. I agree to participate, not because I'm interested in revenge or punishment, but because I understand that if I can use my experience to help other people recognize inappropriate dynamics earlier than I did, then maybe some good can come out of this entire situation. 6 months after my first email to Ridgeline's general counsel, I sit in my apartment and I'm going through documents. I'm organizing the evidence. I'm preparing the 173 documents that I accumulated during those months of quiet investigation for what I'm calling my disciplinary binder. The disciplinary binder is a comprehensive, professionally organized collection of all the evidence I gathered. It includes photographs, email screenshots, text message conversations, hotel receipts, credit card statements, and the 7-second video. It includes written summaries of what each piece of evidence documents. It includes cross-referenced indices that connect individual documents to specific allegations and specific corporate policies. I print this disciplinary binder and I have it professionally bound. I bring it to Kaufman and Dale and I place it on the bookshelf in my office next to the actual legal precedent binders that I use in my daily work. And I do this because I want to be reminded every day of what I learned through this process. I want to be reminded that documentation matters. I want to be reminded that the moment before you act is the moment when you have the most power. I want to be reminded that silence is not neutrality. Silence is complicity. I've also been invited to speak at a business school about workplace ethics. I've been invited to participate in training at multiple companies about the dangers of boundary violations. I've been invited to write articles about workplace harassment and the ways that witness silence contributes to the perpetuation of misconduct. I decline most of these invitations, but I accept a few, because I understand that what happened in my marriage is not unique to my marriage. I understand that this dynamic, the one where a supervisor uses their position to advance the career of someone they have an inappropriate relationship with, while marginalizing other employees, this is a dynamic that exists in many workplaces. And I understand that people who witness this dynamic often stay silent because speaking up seems too difficult, too complicated, too likely to create personal consequences. I understand that witnessing silence contributes to organizational cultures where this kind of conduct is tolerated. I also understand that I have a choice about whether to use my experience to say something or to keep it private, and I've decided to say something. Caleb Foster reaches out to me about a month after the investigation concludes. Caleb is the cybersecurity specialist who set up the retention snapshot that captured Nora's instructions to delete company records. Caleb tells me that he wanted to reach out to thank me because my willingness to report what I'd discovered gave him the courage to report what he knew about the attempt to destroy records. If you hadn't done what you did, Caleb tells me, I never would have had the courage to do what I did. You showed me that standing up for what's right is possible, even when it's really difficult, and even when it has personal consequences. I receive this gratitude with mixed feelings. I'm glad that my actions created space for Caleb to act in accordance with his own values. But I also don't want to be responsible for other people's courage. I don't want my experience to become a template that suggests everyone should handle workplace misconduct the same way I did. But I also understand that sometimes showing people that action is possible is the most important thing you can do. By the end of the year, the divorce is finalized. I no longer legally share a name with Lucas Brennan. I am again Harper Brennan in my own right, not as someone's wife, but as my own person. I'm also beginning to understand who I am when I'm not organizing my life around someone else. I'm beginning to remember what it feels like to be excited about my own career advancement rather than being primarily invested in someone else's. I'm beginning to feel, for the first time in 7 years, like I'm the main character of my own narrative rather than the supporting character in someone else's story. One evening, I'm sitting at home, and I open the folder on my phone called Encrypted 173. I'm looking at all the evidence that I accumulated, and then I rename the folder. I change it from Encrypted 173 to Closed 173. And in that small gesture of renaming, I'm telling myself that this chapter is closed, not because the consequences have ended. The consequences of Lucas's misconduct and my whistleblowing will probably continue for years. Not because I've forgiven everything or forgotten what happened, but because I'm no longer going to carry this as an open wound. I'm no longer going to be the person who's quietly accumulating evidence of betrayal. I'm no longer going to be the person whose nervous habit is to adjust her sleeve cuffs and reorganize water glasses while managing her husband's misconduct. I'm going to be someone who sets boundaries. I'm going to be someone who documents things not to protect others from consequences, but to protect myself from complicity. I'm going to be someone who speaks up when she sees something wrong. Marcus reaches out to me several months after the investigation concludes. He tells me that his relationship with Lucas has improved, but that he's also set his own boundaries with his brother. He tells me that watching what happened between me and Lucas has changed how he thinks about loyalty and family obligation. I realized, Marcus tells me, that the way they treated you, the way Lucas lied to you, and the way Nora used her position, that's the same way they treated everyone. And I was supporting that behavior by pretending I didn't see it, and I'm not going to do that anymore. I also start therapy. I work with a therapist on understanding why I spent 7 years arranging myself around someone else's life. I work on understanding the ways that I learned to make myself small and quiet. I work on understanding how I came to believe that supporting someone else's ambitions was more important than my own. What I learned through therapy is that my tendency to organize and document and control is actually a trauma response. It's a way of managing anxiety about things I can't control by trying to control everything I can. And I learned that my willingness to protect Lucas by covering for him was actually an unhealthy expression of loyalty rather than a healthy expression of love. I learned that healthy relationships don't require you to diminish yourself. Healthy relationships don't require you to secretly document evidence of your partner's betrayal. Healthy relationships don't require you to be in a state of constant anxiety about what you might discover. I learn all of this, and I feel better. I feel freer. I feel like I'm beginning to be able to trust myself and my own judgment again. There's a moment, about a year after I sent the emails to Ridgeline's general counsel, where I'm running again. I haven't run in years, but I've started running because I need a way to process things that doesn't involve organizing or documenting or controlling. And I'm running along the river, and the sun is setting, and I'm aware of my own body in motion, and I'm not adjusting my sleeve cuffs. I'm not reorganizing things. I'm just present with myself. And I think about the moment before dessert at Marcelo's restaurant. I think about the moment when I made the decision to send the emails. I think about how that moment changed everything, and I don't regret it. I don't regret reporting Lucas. I don't regret the dissolution of my marriage. I don't regret choosing myself over loyalty to a system that wasn't serving me. What I do regret is that it took me 7 years to understand that I deserved better. What I do regret is all the time I spent protecting someone who wasn't protecting me. What I do regret is the years I spent making myself smaller. But I don't regret the action itself. I don't regret standing up and saying no. I don't regret choosing to speak. Patricia Chin reaches out to me one final time, about 18 months after everything happens. Patricia tells me that the training I helped develop, the mandatory boundaries training, has been adopted by 3 other major companies in the region. Patricia tells me that organizations are starting to understand that prevention of workplace harassment requires active management of professional boundaries, not just reactive investigation of allegations. You did that, Patricia tells me. You made it possible for other companies to start addressing this issue proactively instead of reactively. I want to tell Patricia that I'm not responsible for anyone else's actions or choices. I want to tell her that I acted out of self-interest and self-protection, not out of a desire to improve corporate culture. But I also understand that sometimes our personal choices have impacts that extend far beyond what we anticipated or intended. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's actually how change happens. Maybe change happens when people start protecting themselves and, in doing so, they create space for institutional change. On the anniversary of the day I sent those emails, I do something that I haven't done in almost 2 years. I allow myself to cry. Not the quiet, controlled crying of someone who's managing their emotions, but real, full-bodied crying. Crying that comes from grief and loss and also from relief and healing. I cry because I was betrayed. I cry because I betrayed myself by staying silent for so long. I cry because I had to choose between my marriage and my integrity, and I chose my integrity. I cry because choosing myself was harder than I ever imagined it would be, and then I stop crying. And I feel lighter, and I understand that I'm finally beginning to move forward. My closing thought, the thing I want to say at the end of all of this, is something that Patricia said to me near the end of this entire process. Patricia told me, "I used to think that silence was neutral. I thought that if I wasn't actively participating in misconduct, then I was okay. But I learned that silence is not neutral. Silence is complicit. Silence is a choice. And every time I choose silence, I'm choosing to protect the people doing the harm." I understood what Patricia meant because I had made that choice too. I had chosen silence for 7 years. I had been quiet while Lucas lied. I had been quiet while Lucas conducted an inappropriate relationship. I had been quiet while Lucas misused company resources, and by being quiet, I was enabling that behavior. And when I finally broke that silence, when I finally stopped being quiet, everything changed. I don't want to repeat that mistake ever again. I don't want to live in silence. I don't want to be complicit. I want to be someone who speaks up, who documents things, who acts in accordance with my own values even when doing so is difficult. I want to be someone who stops organizing and controlling because I'm anxious and starts acting with clarity and purpose. I want to be someone who trusts herself. I want to be someone who chooses herself without apology. And that right there, is the real legacy of what happened. Not the evidence or the documents or the investigation. The real legacy is the person I became when I finally decided to stop protecting someone else and start protecting myself. The real legacy is the person I'm becoming now, in the aftermath of everything. The person who's learning what it means to trust her own judgment. The person who's learning that setting boundaries isn't cruelty. The person who's learning that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no.